All right, everybody, you with your main man, Anthony Brogdon, coming at you straight, no chaser, with a lady that is a heavyweight in her area. She's an expert. You don't get no better than this guest that's coming on the channel today. I'm telling you, I'm super excited that she has agreed to come on Strong Inspirations and give it to you and let you know some of the things that she has investigated, researched, found, stumbled across, whatever, but she has got a complete picture of this story and wrote a book about it. And watch out, you're gonna like this. I'm jamming at Strong Inspirations. Did you see the video I did with the lady who was a professor? And I'm not sure where she is, but she talks about how slaves did all they could and the ways that they did so that they could get an education. Watch that video. Did you watch the one of the video on the channel where the lady says that there was a rich Black guy in the early 1900s? He owned an insurance company and he bought a bunch of land on an island off of South Carolina. The island is Amelia Island, and he had a resort called America for Black people. And I'm talking about maybe 30, 35, 40 years since after slavery ended. Watch that video. Did you see the one where the lady, she talks about, and I'm going deep on this one, what they did with them lynchings and how they treated them brothers and sisters? One guy, he walking down the street, his wife sent him to the store to get some milk, and he never came back because they lynched him and put it in the newspaper. Watch that video. How about this one? I know my sister, she said, I got to tell it. Come on, man, get it. Let me get it on. But I got a couple more. Did you see the video that I have with the guy who found out that his grandfather, who helped raise him, was a KKK member, and he killed the guy in the Elaine massacre? And he said, I never forgave him. I couldn't speak to him ever again. Watch that video. Oh man, I'm covering some of everything. I got the video of the guys talking about Blacks in motor car racing. Did you know that the first Black a really superstar jockeys in the Kentucky Derby were Black guys? I got the guy from the Kentucky Derby Museum. Watch that video. Well, we ain't playing with you. So hit the subscribe button. It's free. Don't ask no information. Just let me know you like me, because I like you already and ain't nothing you can do about it. Hit the like button on this video. I told you what this lady is going to put on your mind is going to blow it. You're done. Watch, like this video. Hit the notifications bell for when I put the videos up. You'll get a ding, a shock or something that's, hey, there's a new video on Strong Inspirations. You want to be the first to watch it. And then tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. Don't keep it to yourself. That ain't right. How about this? I kind of believe if you tell somebody and you share the videos, you'll get blessed. Because you're doing good and you're enlightening people. How about that? Everybody, I got a movie out. It's called Business in the Black. It took me 3 years to do this movie. It's a documentary on the rise of Black business in America. I hired the crew. I wrote the script, found the actors, and produced it. And I had it in 40 cities across America. You like this. It's streaming on Amazon. I went one step further. I wrote a book on the topic, but I got more thorough, many more facts than what I could put in that movie. And you should read my book. And if you don't learn nothing new, I give you money back. How about that? A book with a money back guarantee. If you unsatisfied, you ain't got to do but send me a note. Hey man, I knew all that. Boom, I give you money back. You get an autograph too. Get a copy. Go to my website. It's businessintheblack.net. Lastly, you'll see on there that I'm having my own festival in Kansas City, Kansas. People have asked, well, how did I pick that spot? You know, instead of going deep in the South and whatnot. We're going deep in the South. I got another festival in the fall. I'm just not talking about it just yet. But this one here, slaves walked across the Missouri River, which was a slave state, to get to Kansas, which is a free state. We're going to party in an underground railroad spot where they ended up. We're going to be on the land where them slaves got to. Watch me, I'm jamming on this. It's Memorial Day weekend, May 27th to the 29th. You come, I'm gonna feed you. It's a nominal fee. I'm gonna feed you, entertain you, enlighten you, and all that other stuff, all over the 2-day, 3-day period. Now, you hear me use this word strong a lot. It's my favorite word. Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to my guest today. She's a strong lady. Watch, you'll see for yourself. Come on and introduce yourself. Thank you for being on Strong Inspirations.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm Dr. Sharon Austin, and I'm a professor of political science at the University of Florida. And it's a pleasure and honor to be here with you today.
Yeah, it's our pleasure for sure, because you're a doctor. And let me ask you, that's got to be one of your biggest accomplishments, isn't it? How happy were you when you finished and they agreed to the dissertation and stuff?
Yeah, and the thing is, I went to school straight through, so I didn't take a break because I knew once I stopped, I wouldn't go back. So it was really, it was a big relief. And when I graduated, it was hard to sort of even adjust to having a normal life, because I was so used to having to study all the time that I didn't quite know what to do. Like, I remember calling my sister and I asked her, I said, what do people do on weekends? And she was saying that, she was married, had young kids, and she was like, well, you can come down here and help me with my kids. And I was like, but I didn't quite know what to do with myself because I spent so much time just having to be at the library studying all the time. And finally, I didn't have to do it as much.
Yeah, I love it. So where are you from?
I'm originally from city of Memphis. I born and raised there. I went to school at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Went to my undergrad, city of Memphis, Christian Brothers University, Master's University of Memphis. And after I got my degree at UT Knoxville in 1993, I've been teaching at the college level ever since.
Now, do you know any of your family background of where the slavery is? Was it in Memphis, or do you know that story?
Yeah, I do. My brother, as a matter of fact, is even checking on ancestry.com, but I do know my parents were born and raised in Mississippi, in a small town called Robinsonville, Mississippi, in the Mississippi Delta in Tunica County. And so they were sharecroppers, and they, lived in poverty, my dad was born in 1938, my mother was born in 1940. So they lived during the time of legalized segregation. And then my dad, when he was a teenager, he moved to Memphis to seek a better life. And then eventually my mom moved there too. And, the three of us, my sister and brother and I, were born. But yeah, I have a family that can trace this legacy back to slavery. And my brother is looking into that. And we're finding out a lot of things on ancestry.com about our family and things that we had no idea about. So yeah, we grew up in the South. As a matter of fact, the neighborhood I grew up in Memphis was a Black working class neighborhood. It was a white neighborhood. And when the Black people moved in, white people moved out, but it became a Black neighborhood. And mostly all of the families had a similar type of story, because we all came from, our parents all were people who grew up in the rural South, working in the fields, didn't have much money, didn't have an education, and they moved to the city seeking a better life.
Now, let's stay on that just a tad, because I like that. He was a sharecropper.
Right.
Both of them were. And did you ever go to where he sharecropped? Have you ever been?
I did. I didn't actually visit the plantation, but we spent a lot of time in Mississippi because I still have family members who live in the Delta. As a matter of fact, I just went to visit my uncle who lives there over the Christmas holiday. But I got a chance to spend a lot of time in Mississippi as a kid. And we would go, and because a lot of my mom's family still lived there, we would go visit them. And they still lived, in the same kind of area until the casinos came. And that was what my second book was about, just the casinos and the differences in Tunica. And then they lived there. So I used to spend a lot of time looking at the cotton fields and looking at the way my parents grew up.
What did he tell? He share some stories of what sharecropping? Because sharecropping, you wasn't gonna get out of that system. The
No,
man, I don't think he ever told anybody that I owe you money.
right, right. I mean, that was why everybody had to leave. Like the Great Migration happened because so many people were, that's the same story most of us in the Black community have. If we were to ask our, grandparents and people, if they're still alive, or if you were to research your family's history, you'll find that most of your family members were in the rural South, and because
Yeah,
that's all we could do back then
yeah,
after slavery. And so people had nowhere to go, so they stayed on the plantation. They were told that if you work in the fields and work as sharecroppers, we'll give you a share of the crop, and we'll, at the end of harvest, we'll pay you,
right.
but you never got paid. So
Yeah,
people were really dirt poor, as my parents were. They, my dad had to quit school, and he was 10 years old, and he couldn't continue to go to school because he worked in the fields. My mother had a high school education, but she also worked in the fields. And so that's why so many Black families left the South and moved to other parts of the country, because there was no way you could get out of that system. You were kept in poverty. And then with the other conditions too, the environment of terror, the lynchings, the murders,
yeah.
the harassment, the unwritten
Did he ever face? Let me stop
rules.
it. Did he ever face
Yeah.
any of that you heard?
Not that I know of.
Oh,
I
good.
do know that when he was 14, they were so poor that he learned how to make whiskey and sell whiskey.
Okay,
And
that's the
so
hustle.
that's
That's the
how he was
hustle.
able to get some money, and that's how he was able to save enough to finally leave.
Let me ask you this, and I don't mean no disrespect in this question. What does a 10th grade education mean?
Mhm.
When, I mean, if you can analyze that, does that mean he
Yeah.
can read the newspaper?
Well, he actually had a sixth grade education. He left school when he was 10. And so,
Right.
yeah, so he was able to read. My dad, he's deceased now, both my parents are, but both of them, he were really smart. He could read, and he knew how to do basically reading, writing, arithmetic.
Okay.
And he learned other things. He sort of taught himself other things later on, but that was the way it was. You didn't really have an opportunity to get an education.
Yeah,
And the belief
right.
was that you didn't need one because you felt like you were going to forever be working in the fields.
Yeah. Did in that working in the field thing, how did when he left, did he owe the man money and the man said you can't leave, or he had to flee in the middle of the night type scenario?
Yeah, well, he had worked and saved money unbeknownst to people, from what they tell me,
Oh,
just
really?
saving money bootlegging. And he had that money, and but again, like you said, you couldn't just leave. In some cases, people had to sneak out, and in other cases, you always felt like you had to pay before you had to leave. So it was a system where Black people could never get anything. You could
Yeah.
never get out of debt. So he
Yeah.
managed to pull
Okay, this is
himself
a
out
good
of
one
it.
here. Did he see you graduate with the doctorate?
He did.
I'm sure he cried like none
Yeah,
ever
he
too.
he passed away in 1998. He
Yeah.
was 59. My mom passed away in 2016, and she was 76. But he was able. I graduated in 93, so he was able to see me
Yeah.
graduate and become a professor. And he was proud of all of his kids.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure. And so he took what he had and got to Memphis and made more out of it.
Right, right. Got to Memphis, worked in a factory, saved money. First lived in a small apartment. Then my mom came to Memphis, and then finally they eventually moved into a house, the house where I was raised in. That my mom lived in that house. We still own it, but
Yeah.
she lived in that house for all of her life, and that's the house we were raised in, really nice working class neighborhood.
Now, what's the neighborhood? I got some another guy on
Yeah.
Memphis from there. What's the Black neighborhood of Memphis?
It's called Indian Hills. It's in
Okay.
like Southwest Memphis, not far from the Mississippi state line.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you remember? Did you ever have any white friends growing up?
For a while I did.
Really?
Yeah, for a little while
Really?
we were bused. We lived in a Black neighborhood, but we were bused from when I was in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade to another elementary school that was a 45-minute bus ride across town. And Memphis is a strange kind of city. My first book was about Memphis politics, but when Black people would move into a neighborhood, white people would move out. And so we were bused from a Black neighborhood to a white neighborhood, but within a couple of years, it became a Black neighborhood too, because when Black families moved in, Black kids started attending schools, the white people moved out. And now that's also a Black neighborhood. It was called Oak Haven,
Okay.
off Winchester. And so I had white friends in elementary school, and we went to school and everything, was fine. Yeah.
But now one more question on that, on this note. Where were you at when Dr. King was killed at the hotel? If do you remember that?
Right. Well, I was born in 1965, so I was only 3 when that
Okay,
happened.
right,
But
right.
I do remember my parents. Well, really, it was before my 3rd birthday. I was only 2, so I don't remember it. But I do remember the small apartment we lived in was in that area. It was like right off of downtown, 3rd and Crump in Memphis, if you're familiar with Memphis. And I remember when hearing the story when my dad came home from work, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She stayed there with me and my brother and sister. And he came home and they, of course, were devastated. And it happened like right near where we lived. I think it probably was maybe 10 minutes away.
Oh,
And so I
really?
remember my mom said that my dad was saying, the kids can't go outside to play. Let's just go in the house. But yeah, they were both devastated.
Yeah. So now you've written a book, and let's talk about the book. Is titled what? Let's show us the book.
Okay, well, I've written 3 books. This is
3
the one
books.
that's my most recent one, and I hope you can see for the glare, but
Yeah, I can
it's
see
called
it.
the Caribbeanization of Black Politics, Race, Power, and Group Consciousness and Political Participation in America. So this is
That's a deep title for a book.
yeah.
Oh, I tell you, smart man, you got all A's throughout all your life. That's a deep title.
Yeah. So I started to work on it years ago when I published it in 2018. And I started work on it because I have so many students who are from the Caribbean, whose parents are from the Caribbean, who are
Okay.
Black. And I've noticed, like, in some of the discussions we have in class, sometimes their views are different from those of the other Black students. And so that kind of made me want to research it.
Yeah. And so what's the book about?
Well, the book looks at 4 cities: Boston, Chicago, Miami, and New York City. And it looks at just the rise in the Black Caribbean immigrant population in each of those cities, especially the rise of the Haitian population and the West Indian population. And it looks at just the impact on the history, the culture, but also the impact on politics in those cities. And it questions whether, there are some differences between Blacks and Caribbean-born Blacks. There are some divisions even between the 2 groups, but it questions whether or not they put those divisions aside when it's time for them to vote. And do they tend to vote for the same candidates? Do they tend to agree on certain views? And I'm finding that they do. So despite whatever prejudices or stereotypes the groups have of each other, or whatever differences they have some things in common because they're all Black.
Right.
And so one of those things, of course, is police brutality, unfortunately, in each community. They're affected by that. And so they come together around issues like that. If a Black man or a Caribbean man is a victim of police brutality, the community comes together, puts their differences aside to support that person. And let's say with Barack Obama, when he ran for president, that was something that a lot of people had a sense of pride in, of all races.
Right.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
And so the community came together to vote for him, but for other political candidates as well.
Let me go back here just a tad on this. And we've talked about it on the channel and other videos. Black people come out of Africa. Initially, the Europeans send them in the slave trade to Brazil. Then from Brazil, they start investigating through Columbus. And these are questions more than me making the statements. But then they started investigating some of the other Caribbean islands. I'm right so far.
Right.
One of the islands that really had the most amount, and you just said this name, was Haiti. Haiti has a unique history.
Yeah, they do.
Can you tell us a little on that story?
Yeah, Haiti has a unique history because now when you hear about Haiti, you hear about, of course, the earthquake that took place in 2010 that was really devastating, but there have been others, including as recently as 2017. Haiti has always been besieged by earthquakes. And so you hear about the poverty and the fact that Haiti is considered to be the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but you don't hear about like the sustainability, the fact that there are some young entrepreneurs that are going there that are really trying to do something to build the economy. You hear about the political corruption. Recently, even one of their leaders was assassinated. And so you'll hear about the legacy of the Duvalier, Papa Doc and Baby Doc, the Duvalier regime. But a lot of Haitians have immigrated to America and have
Right.
settled in the cities that I study, especially in the South Florida area, in the Miami area. And they've been very successful politically, as I point out in the book. Before
Yes.
2000, there were no Haitians in elected office in Florida. But since then, they have grown just dramatically over the last 20 years. They've been able to elect a lot of people who served in office. They were elected before 2000, but as of 2000, there were none. But then later, they've been able to elect people. They've been
Yes.
able to join coalitions with other groups, and that has benefited the country of Haiti, because many Haitian Americans and Haitian immigrants in the United States remain committed to Haiti, and they send money home to relatives who live there, and they're still concerned about the politics there. So they really have made a lot of progress in a recent amount of time.
Now, let me ask you this. Is Haiti, did Haiti, and I don't know if I got this right, Haiti was one of the first Caribbean islands to get their independence?
Right. Haiti has gained one of the things that I even teaching about in a class that I teach called African Americans in Paris. Haitians have had, I guess, a troubled relationship with the French. And so with people like Toussaint Louverture, they were able to fight for and gain independence. And, you know, this was really remarkable for a Black country to be able to fight for and maintain their independence, because even some African countries to this day are still dominated by the British, and other predominantly Black countries are dominated by people who are white from other countries. But Haiti was able to fight for and gain their independence as early as 1800s.
When we say fight for it, that was a revolt,
Right. That was a
Civil War
revolt.
type scenario, right?
Right. That was Toussaint Louverture, who fought for Haitian independence, and that's something that's celebrated every year. So that was really remarkable for people who were living in a poor country to be able to fight for their independence. And so really, when you compare that even to African Americans in America, and you look at the different slave revolts that took place here that, you know, had mixed successes, people like Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, and others who revolted against slavery, they weren't able to actually gain independence for African Americans as a group in their country. Although some of the revolts were successful as far as killing people, they
Yes.
didn't accomplish the same kind of things that Haitians accomplished in terms of gaining independence.
Are there other Caribbean islands that also soon after seeing Haiti's success decided to themselves revolt? Is that the way it was, like a domino effect from that point on?
Right. It was a domino effect, and there have been revolts in countries all over the world.
Yeah.
But, you know, you haven't really seen that kind of success in terms of gaining independence as what happened in Haiti. So again, it shows that poor people can fight back, and poor people sometimes can gain their independence. And that was something that was really unusual for the time, because you didn't see that happening in other countries very much. You saw revolts, but they weren't as successful.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you know this? Did they revolt in Cuba? Is Cuba's type scenario similar to Haiti, and just years later?
Yeah, there's a similar situation in Cuba, but there are not nearly as many Afro-Cubans as there are in Haiti. Haiti is considered to be a Black country. So really, when you think about Haiti, as I point out in the book,
Okay.
it's on the island of Hispaniola. And so Haiti is right across the border from the Dominican Republic.
Okay.
So people who are in the Dominican Republic have oftentimes not thought of themselves as being Black, even though sometimes they have, you know, skin color just like mine and yours. They don't think of themselves as being Black. They think of Haitians as being Black. So to answer your question, in Cuba, there have been Afro-Cubans who've revolted, but it's been more difficult in Cuba because of the communism there that's always been there. And also because in Cuba, there aren't as many Black people. When people think of themselves in Cuba, they don't think of themselves as being Black Cuban. They just think of themselves as being Cuban.
And this is going to lead back to the book. But what I guess, let me ask you this. When you don't consider yourself Black and you dark skinned, what are you calling yourself? I'm not going to be connected to Africa, even though I look like it, and I'm just telling you this. How does that go?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that in the book too. In some communities, especially in the Dominican Republic, even people who there was a dictator named Rafael Trujillo, and
Okay,
he was like this really oppressive dictator, and he was a person of African descent, but he
right.
considered himself to be white because he was Dominican. And so, if you look at some of the statues in the Dominican Republic and in Cuba and in some other countries too, people who clearly were black had their features in a statue as making it look like they had white features,
Oh,
and they sort of
really?
hid the fact that they actually were actually black. They didn't want people to know. And so Trujillo was someone who was really racist and oppressive toward black people, but he didn't want people to know that he himself was of African descent. So in the book, I talk about the fact that in other countries, in America, we have like major categories: black, white, Hispanic, Asian, other.
Yeah.
But in other countries, they have a lot more racial categories. So you could be someone who has dark skin, African features. In America, of course, with the one drop rule that I talk about, you're
Yes.
considered to be black. But in other countries, you might be someone who has dark skin and who has African features, but you may consider yourself to not be black. You might call yourself a mulatto, or you might call yourself some other racial category to avoid calling yourself being black.
And as a result of that, if you do that, then you try to put yourself in some class system that puts you higher than them people who say I'm black.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes with some of these immigrants who don't consider themselves to be black in their home country, they then move to America. And then,
Okay.
in America, race relations are completely different, and especially in the past. And so they've come to America and people have told them, okay, you're black. And they resent that because they're like, wait a minute, black is something I'm not black in my home country. And I don't consider myself to be black. But in America, we have the one drop rule that says that if you have
Yeah.
even one drop
Yeah.
of black blood,
Yeah.
I don't care how light your skin is or what your
Right.
features are, how you look, you are black.
Right.
And so that's why some immigrants over the years have had a hard time adjusting to coming to America, because when they come here, people tell them you're black, and that means that you are in the same category as someone who's African American.
Right.
And so before, I guess, the civil rights gains, you were considered to be, you had to deal with the same types of rules. You couldn't sit at the front of the bus. You
Right.
couldn't go to the white hotel. I don't care what you
Yes.
thought you were, you were black in
Yes.
American society.
Is there a time period when there's an influx of and I think Haitians, or let's stay with them, and then maybe you can cite some others, when a lot of them come to America? Is there
Yeah,
some migration moments and stuff like that?
right,
And what
right.
what made that moment happen for them?
Yeah, there are some migration moments for just, immigrants of color, because for the longest time in America, there were quotas that meant that European immigrants and Canadian immigrants who were white could come to this country, but Black immigrants had a hard time. So it wasn't until probably the mid 1960s, and there was a law that was passed, the Hart-Celler Act, that made it possible for them to remove those quotas. So that's when you saw an increase in Black immigrants, Latin immigrants, Asian immigrants, and immigrants of color just in general, who for many years have been kept out, but now were able to come here. So that's when you kind of saw the first wave of Caribbean and African immigration to this country. And then, especially with Haitians in the 1980s, in South Florida, you saw a lot of Haitian immigrants coming here, and a lot of Cuban immigrants as well, with Cubans, the Mario refugees, and you saw a lot of Haitians who were not only fleeing the poverty in their country, but also there were a lot of political issues, political persecutions there, human rights
Okay.
abuses there. So I guess the first wave was in the 60s, and the second major wave was in the 80s.
If we could cite what Caribbean nation has the most number of immigrants that have come to America, is there something like that?
Yeah, there is. And I mentioned that in the book. I would say it depends on
The
the
book is
city,
good.
but yeah.
It's all in the book. Hey, man, I can't stump this lady. It's in the book.
Yeah, I think probably the largest numbers in some communities, Haitians are considered to be separate from Caribbean immigrants, but I guess Haitians are a large population, especially in South Florida. If you go to Miami and in other communities in South Florida, but also other West Indian immigrants like Jamaicans and other people from the Caribbean. As a matter of fact, New York City, as I point out, has the largest West Indian population in the nation, and
Oh,
also
really?
in
Okay.
Broward County, Florida. there are quite a few Caribbean immigrants just in South Florida generally, but especially in Broward County. But New York City and also Miami, those were called gateway cities. And so those were the cities that immigrants came to when the first city that they reached in America, and many of them settled in those cities. But then in later years, they started to move to other places like Boston and Chicago. So that's kind of what I'm looking at in the book.
I got you. Is
Yeah.
there when we talk about it, is Creole coming to this, something like that? Isn't there some Creole connection? What's the Creole thing?
Well, the Creole connection is mostly when you think about like New Orleans and Louisiana.
Right.
But there are Haitians who speak Haitian Creole. That is their native language. But I think that people who speak Haitian Creole still consider themselves to be Haitian. But people who consider themselves to be Creole are people who mostly talk about like the French influence in their French background.
Who owned Haiti? Who owned Haiti? What European country colonized Haiti?
I would say Haiti was mostly dominated by France, and that's where when they gained their independence, they gained it from France.
If we come, I was coming to a close. When we talk about the Caribbean islands, was France or was Britain or Portugal, and maybe there may be one or two others, was one of them more dastardly? You know what I mean? And that kind of dastardly is the word. You say you know what I mean. Let's go with that.
Yeah, okay. So was one of them, I guess, more dastardly, more oppressive than the other? I guess it's hard to say. I would probably say no, because I would think if your country is dominated by another probably white country, then you're dealing with various types of exploitation and various types of abuses. And I don't think the abuses were any worse here in America, or I guess some people would debate that, or in other countries like Haiti or others. If you don't have independence, you are oppressed.
Yes.
And you have to deal with certain things in terms of a lack of political rights. You're sort of like we even talked about here with my parents in sharecropping. You're probably have most of your communities living in poverty. You have to deal with other types of terrorism, and in this country we've dealt with murders and lynching and still do. And so I guess it really doesn't matter who is oppressing you, as long as you're oppressed. It's I guess you could say the word that you just used, it's a dastardly situation. And I can't think that of any situation where any country was any worse than any other. It was just, it was bad everywhere.
Yeah. Well, okay, but then when you now does for lack of a better word, the I want to say voodoo, but that's not it. Those type of mystical practices, religious practices, make a difference.
Oh, I think in a way, I don't really address that a lot in the book, but I know what you're talking about with like Haitian voodoo and Haitian religion. And I think the one thing I want to point out is when we think about the voodoo religion, we have a stereotype of what it is in America, based on what we see in like horror movies and stuff, but that's not really what it is.
That's not really what it was. That's
right. So really it was a way for people to worship in a way that was non-traditional.
That's right.
But it wasn't about like, killing chickens and different things that I've seen in the movies. But I think that as far as that religion, that was a way that they coped. Just in the same way in America, we use religion over the years to cope with our situation. That was one of the ways that they cope. But because of the misconceptions about the religion, people thought that it was more of like a cult-like situation, but that's not what it was.
Yeah, I agree. And I had some people say that. A lot of it was we using the roots and stuff like that to solve our medical problems. Right. And they didn't understand how they were doing it, and it was successful. So now they're going to give it a bad term, so that because they wasn't able to profit off it, the Black people were doing it. Right. When we talk about the different Caribbean, and does the way that they were enslaved, and you might have alluded to this already, or the enslavers or something, does that? And because Haiti did what they did to get their freedom so much earlier, does that do something to the individual to make them think a little differently? Yep. I mean, other than I'm not Black, but does that do some cultural type stuff that they didn't bring that to America?
I think so, because I think it gives them a sense of pride. Because
Yes.
even with one of the things we have to think about with most immigrants, regardless of what their race or ethnicity is, most of them want to go back to their home country. But in
Oh,
many
really?
cases, yeah, they can't because most of the Black immigrants, especially, don't intend to stay in America when they come. But in many cases, they come to America because of seeking opportunities that they don't have in their home country. But in many cases, they end up going back. Like even I've had a number of students who've been African, who could have stayed in America. Some of their family members came here and stayed, but they chose to go back. And so I think it did give them a sense of pride, because that's one of the things that I've mentioned also in the book, is that people who are of Caribbean descent consider themselves to be Black, but they don't really think of themselves as being African American, like
Yeah.
me and you. They sort of think of themselves as being, okay, I'm Black because of my color, but I'm a Haitian American. So they're very proud of their Caribbean American identity. And I think a
When
lot
we
of that
talk
is
about,
because of the history of
yeah,
what
I
they've
love it.
gone through.
When we talk about Haiti and others, well, sugar crops was one of the big ones, but then there were others. And did the crop make that they had to toil the soil? Did that dictate a little bit of the person? What I mean by that is sugar might be easier to do than rice or cotton
Yeah.
or tobacco. Does that do something to the individual and give them a different skill set, maybe, or something like that?
Well, it's not something I really even thought about, but I would think, I mean, I don't know. I would think that it probably doesn't because I think if you
Okay.
have that type of backbreaking labor where you're working in the field, because just keep in mind, if anybody's watching this who actually has done this work, and I read about it, my parents did it, but I never had to work the fields because my parents gave me a better life. But that's backbreaking work from the sun up to sundown, and you have an overseer watching you. So it's just sort of like slavery in the sense that, I mean,
Yes.
of course, it's better than slavery because you're
Yes.
free, but really you never gain economic freedom or political freedom. So I don't think it matters what crop you're trying to build. I
Yes.
think
Okay.
it's just that it's backbreaking, and it's an exploitative system that's designed to keep Black people in a system of oppression.
Yes. There may be two more. So when we talk about the holidays, let's go over a couple of them. What's the major holiday in Haiti? Let's say Dominican Republic,
Yeah.
and maybe a couple others that you know that I just have not said.
Okay, I would say in Haiti, they just recently celebrated Haitian independence. And so we talked about their independence from France. So I think that's a major day for them.
Which is
Dominican
when.
Republic, I forget the day, but it was just recently, really, it was just a few weeks ago, I
So it's
believe,
in
that they just,
January.
yeah, I believe so. But if
Okay.
anybody's watching this,
Okay.
don't quote me on this, you could
Yeah.
check it.
Yeah. I got you. I got you.
Yeah, but in every country they have like an Independence Day. And so I think the difference in America, there was a speech that Frederick Douglass gave, like, what is Independence Day or what does it mean for a slave? So I think in every country, Independence Day is celebrated, but it's different here in America. Until recently, it was hard for Black people to celebrate independence because independence means equality, justice, freedom. And those were things that we didn't have in this country. And even now, you have some people in America who say that they don't celebrate July 4th as Independence Day because we still are looking to gain independence. We're still
Right.
looking to gain those ideals. So I would say, in answer to your question, the major holiday, of course, everybody celebrates Christmas, but
Okay. Right.
also Independence Day is also a major holiday that's celebrated in all countries around the world.
Yeah, I love it. So now, just give us a little preview. You've written other books too, and we'll have you back on the show. Do you have those books there that you can show us right quick, or tell us the names of
Well,
them?
they're downstairs only.
Okay. Okay.
Well, yeah, I have the first book that I wrote 20 years ago. It was my dissertation, and it talks about politics in my hometown. It's called Race, Power, and Political Emergence in Memphis. And it talks about Memphis politics and just their efforts to try to elect a Black mayor over the years and civil rights. And my
Okay.
second book was called The Transformation of Delta Plantation Politics. And it looked at the Mississippi Delta and some of the things that I mentioned about sharecropping and just the fact that Blacks had no rights to politics, but yet we were able to fight and gain rights. And eventually there were more Black elected officials in Mississippi than any other state. And then later the casinos came in and finally brought jobs to the Delta, but the money didn't trickle down to the poor people. The same people who had been wealthy all over the years were the ones who primarily benefited from
Yeah.
casino
Sure.
gaming. Yeah, so I wrote
Yeah.
those two. Yeah.
Yeah. How you like teaching?
Oh, I love teaching. I've been teaching now since 1992. Seems like just yesterday, but this is
Yeah.
my 30th year.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Is there a question that I have not asked you relative to the book? Something that comes up? Is
Well,
there
I
a
think,
passage in the
yeah,
book that is your
yeah.
favorite passage that you can share with us?
Well, I like the fact in the book that a lot of my research looks at Black women, and my next
Okay.
book is looking at Black female mayors. But in this book, I like the fact that I talked about women that many people have never heard of.
Okay. Yes.
Like Constance Baker Motley in New York, like Carrie Meek, who recently passed away, the Congresswoman from Miami. And so women were very much involved in civil rights and politics, but yet women have never really gotten the credit or the recognition that they were due. And
Yes.
so in each of the cities, I write about women who've been involved in politics and civil rights.
How about this? Let's stay on that woman thing. Are there some women out of some of the Caribbean countries that a lot of people don't know of that played a big role?
Right. There are, especially in Boston, I mentioned women like Dorsina Forey and I forget her name, but there are Haitian women who've won office in Boston. There are women
Okay.
in Miami who have won office. There's a woman who's a Jamaican woman who currently is the only Black female mayor in the state of Florida. Her name is it's only Black female Caribbean mayor. Her name is Hazel Rogers, and she's a woman who was born in Jamaica, whose family immigrated to New York City and later moved to South Florida. And now she's mayor of a city called Lauderdale Lakes. So there have been women who have been Caribbean, and you're seeing more Caribbean women running for office, women and men running for office. And at first, the Black community was kind of suspicious of people who were coming from other countries and running for office. But now you don't really see that same type of suspicion. You see Black people celebrating the fact that Caribbeans are running for office and supporting their campaigns and assisting them to be able to win.
Yeah. Okay. One more then on that. How about any women out of that not here in America but in the Caribbean? A couple of those names that we need to know of.
I would say, as far as women who are in the Caribbean who are running for office.
Well, not just running for office. Let's give you an example. There's a lady who they tribute her as the one who freed Jamaica. I can't think of her name, but she was the one that did the fighting. And do you know that name?
No, I don't know.
Of Jamaica. Okay, how about, is there one in Haiti that a lot of people know of her name?
Let me see. Women who are currently in Haiti.
But back in history days.
Well, the book didn't really talk about people in Haiti. It mostly talking about Haitian Americans.
Okay, I got you. Okay, no problem. Do you have a website? How do people follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Facebook, or you can follow me. Just look at the University of Florida website. It's people.clas.ufl.edu. And you could just do a search of my name, University of Florida, and find my website there.
Okay. Oh, excellent. Well, we're going to blast it out. People go down there and definitely get her book, get all her books, get the book she gonna write. put a pre-order in for those books, because you know they're good, because you can't stop her. She got all the answers right there. She already written it down. That's how thorough she is. That's the beautiful thing. And she come on strong inspirations. Oh my God, I'm so excited. And I really like it. I say this with everybody, hit the subscribe button. Let me just, reiterate that a little bit. Hit the like button on this video, because I know you didn't know all these things she told you. Hit the notifications bell when the videos come up. You get a ding or something like that. Tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. Tell somebody about her. Tell somebody about her. Look her up. Like I say, support what she's doing. And then to you, I say with all sincerity, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing. Let me tell you, you come from that humble background. You went to class every day, you study, you sat in the front of the room. I know you had to, because you wasn't gonna let that teacher get nothing past you. Kids and everybody who watch this is an example of what happens when you do that. and you get it done. Now you like, what am I gonna do? I done got all A's, and now you getting an A in life. I love it. Please continue sharing this knowledge with folks. And with that, I'll say bye-bye, we out.